these are race-based determinants of health. It's just interesting.
Oh, sure. Like, what would be, do you have an example of like a race-based determinants of health as opposed to socioeconomic?
Well, I think we talk about it a lot when we talk about availability of mental health care and clinics, and we'll say, that that area is underserved based on its socioeconomic class. And
Mm.
maybe what we really mean is practitioners don't want to work in that neighborhood because of concerns for um, race difficulties. We avoid that identifying um, the difficulty of this neighborhood based on race. It feels much more professional sounding or non-judgmental to say it's the socioeconomic class when really it is the race that's determining our choice to not work in that area. A lot of
Right.
this goes a lot of this, kind of ties back to Creighton. When Creighton closed and they moved the majority of the hospital to Bergen and left little Creighton there, a little emergency room, which was the only medical resource for, a good fourth of the Omaha city.
Mm.
Is a pretty powerful statement about the amount of healthcare we want to provide to this community. Yeah. Anyway, I just found this article and information to be very interesting.
Lane, what about yours? What you had talked about, you clicked on Article 6, I believe is what it was, the grade expectations from Harvard.
Um, no.
No, no,
I
not that one.
I took the little quiz on equitable grading.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and then I guess, I didn't realize it was from Harvard. I just started looking at yeah. So 5 and 6.
What did you think of that quiz? I took that quiz as well.
Yeah, I had some, well, I felt like I couldn't actually select for some of the questions. I couldn't select what I did because that wasn't a choice. But anyway, I thought it was interesting that they recommend that homework, not be graded or be graded at less than 5% of the total grade. And I guess I then questioned, well, what's the definition of homework? Is it what you do before class or after class or both or and
To
I don't know.
to bring everybody up to speed, if you didn't take the quiz, it was a check or a quiz to see how fair your grading processes were. And were they biased or working against some populations by the way that you grade? And I thought some things were really interesting in the way that I answered that I think a lot of you would find interesting as well. So if you haven't taken that quiz, I would encourage you to go out and take it. But Lane, so you saw the homework as an issue. I certainly thought including homework in gave people a better chance to score because not every student does great on environments.
That's what I thought. And I want to grade the homework because I want to encourage people to do it before class.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. And then there was there was another comment about replacing an initial grade with a new grade if the students repeat an assessment. And again, the option that we follow in the PTA program wasn't one of the options listed in the multiple choice quiz, but I thought it was interesting that they recommended that that you replace the old grade with the new grade if the students repeat an assessment and do better the second time. I don't agree with that, but it was interesting to read their thoughts on it.
Did anybody else
Elaine,
take that quiz?
this is
Go ahead.
Al. I didn't take the quiz, but I'd like to respond to repeating an assessment. We do allow that in the doctoral program, that an early assignment is an assignment that's worth a fair amount of points. Is a person is able to get feedback and then redo the assignment for the highest grade of 90%. And they have 48 hours from when the grade is posted to say they want to redo it. And they have 1 week from when the grade was posted to submit it. And the reason we do that is because we do have a wide variety of faculty. And while faculty might be consistent within the course itself, everybody's just a little bit different on how they approach things. And so it really provides the student the opportunity to figure out the faculty member, if you will. And if they just missed it, like they just didn't understand it or whatever, they have an opportunity to remediate. And it's not for every assignment. There's just certain assignments that we designate, and usually those occur early in the course, because then it gives that student that opportunity to really do better and understand expectations in that course, so that when the larger assignment is due towards the end of the course, they just stand a better chance of nailing it, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, Alice, I agree. And I do that as well. But I read this differently because they didn't say assignment, they said assessment.
Oh,
And so I thought about our practical examinations, where we, if the student fails a practical examination, we do give them an opportunity to retake a practical. It's not the same practical exam, but we do give them a second chance
to remediate.
But we don't give them the grade if they earn an 81% on their second chance, we don't give them 81%. We give them a 75% because that's the grade that they would need to pass the exam. But we didn't. Yeah. Anyway, it said assessment, and so I thought this should be something that they already know how to do, right? A test, some kind of exam.
Thanks
So
for clarifying that. Yeah.
That was why I was thinking that we don't replace the first assessment grade with the second assessment grade. But anyway, and then there was a comment in the Harvard grade expectations information about deducting points for late assignments, and it seemed from reading it that I guess I didn't get all the way through the article, but they said that they didn't feel that should be done, deducting points for late assignments. So again, we deduct points for late assignments, and I do that because I feel like it's important as healthcare providers to do the tasks that you're supposed to do in the time allotted to do them. And so that's my mindset of, if you're documenting on a patient, you need to get it done that day. You can't put it off and do it another day. So my thought is that they need to be trained in doing things at the time that they are due, and not procrastinate. But that's just my mindset, and I'd like to hear other people's opinion on that too.
Yeah, I have always, this is Lori, I have always agreed with that, Lane. I always have taken into account behaviors as well as learning, and just based on, in total agreement with what you said, to teach those like job skills and those professional skills. I read one of the articles from Minnesota State, a Minnesota State Equity Toolbox. And a couple of the things that they said in there is that behavior should not be graded, which I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that, but that was a big thing for them in terms of equity, that behavior shouldn't be graded. And then the other thing that they were saying is that in terms of like late work and redoing assignments, et cetera, is that we shouldn't put parameters on people's learning. So if it takes them longer to learn, then we should allow that. So they were just pointing out some things about equity that I hadn't really thought about before. But they were very clear that the focus is on learning, and however people learn and however long it takes them to learn should be accepted and allowed. So just some of the things that you were saying, Lane, were sort of addressed in that article that I read, which I found really interesting.
I do think when I'm grading, if the student has come to me and said, I was not able to get this done by this date, here's my circumstance, I have this going in this class, whatever, I'm happy to give an extension and not take a deduction. But if I don't hear from you and you just submit it late, to me, that's a different circumstance than a student who has need of a little more time. Maybe that's wrong. I'm new to this little game that we do here, but I guess I feel like if the student is taking ownership and accountability to the fact that they're going to be late and they talk to me about it, I mean, I get that some of them can get overwhelmed with all the things that come due at the same time.
Yes, I agree with Tracy. I do the same thing. If you communicate, they're adults, you can communicate, life happens. I can't prevent that. And that makes them better professionals when they have an open line of communication. So I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree. That's another skill that they need to learn, right?
Yeah, I think so.
We do the same in the doctoral program. They don't even have to tell me why. I just say it's going to be late and when I can expect it. And because what I want is accountability. I can't grade them all on the same day anyway, so it's just fine.
Right. I'm glad to hear that that's
That
accepted
is so
practice.
true.
That's what's fun about finding some of these topics. You get the good controversial ones and see what people's thoughts are. So I think the conversation's fantastic. One other one that I found in there, I'm actually going to share my screen for just a second because I screenshotted this one because it was kind of interesting to me. Can everybody see my screen now? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I thought this was an interesting question, and then their response behind it. It fit really well with our conversation from last week on grade inflation.
Well, I actually agree with D, so.
Yeah.
That was one of the only ones that I agreed with them on, I guess.
I just thought it was interesting. Last week, there was a lot of discussion about shouldn't things fall on the bell curve and we should be giving more. Not everybody deserves an A was part of the conversation from last week. And I thought this was kind of an interesting one because it flew in the face to that bell curve strategy that so many of us are invested in.
That's an interesting comment that not everybody deserves an A, because if they do the work and they do the work well, then why shouldn't they get an A?
Well, I think the point we were making in that conversation was that our bell curve is firmly in the A.
Oh.
As far as graduate studies, and that someone who gets a B is less common than someone who gets an A. The concern was, as a director, when I log into someone else's course and I see that their final grade in a course is a 100, I am concerned about the quality of feedback and the rigor that's being applied to student work. While it's not impossible for someone to get a 100, I wouldn't expect in a class of 20 that 8 of them would. So that was the discussion related to grade inflation.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad
If you get if
Thank
you
you.
get an A, you get an A. That's absolutely, but not that many people would.
Not a 100% A.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, that
they
doesn't
should be
happen
teaching
for
the
us.
class at that point then. Yeah.
And I think it was more at the undergraduate level as well. So there was a lot of discussion from the undergraduate side as to those discussions. Certainly, if you're in the graduate level, I think that bell curve should shift, but an undergraduate is probably a little different bell curve.
Our bell curve is currently pretty ugly, in an ugly place. It's
That's not good to hear either.
it isn't, and it's frustrating. And yet we have those tales that show that there's the possibility for them to do better. You know, you've got those 5 students getting A's that are putting in the work, and so yeah, it's difficult. I do think I agree with you. 100, if everyone's getting 100%, then that doesn't lend much value to the work that you're doing, right? Although it is fun to get the 100. It's not been so long ago I was writing those papers. It's very fun, but probably not real meaningful.
I've started collecting information from those top 5 students on their study skills, their test taking strategies to share with the rest of the students.
Yeah.
To just, give them more information about how to be successful in the course. I don't know if it helps.
One of the things in the doctoral program, and you really can't maybe compare it so much to undergraduate, where this is their first real entry into college and what's all expected there. But the top 20% of your classes, chances are they're the most fun to engage with, right? They're the most engaged with you. They
Right.
have brilliant ideas. But I'm going to be real honest, as a faculty member, those people never needed me. They would have succeeded without me as a faculty member. They didn't need a faculty. You give them the content, they're going to do it, whether you're there or not.
Yeah.
It's those bottom 20% where I feel I have the most value as a faculty, because I can then go to where they're at. And it's not like I'm standing at the finish line saying, this is where you need to be. I'm going where they're at and I'm walking them across the finish line. And so, one of the things I really encourage the doctoral faculty is the student who's getting the lowest grade. And I just said that, more commonly it's an A, but there are some people that really do struggle. That's where your value comes in, because that's where you really will make the difference, because otherwise without you, they're not going to succeed. So, I mean, that's something that, I'm proud when any of my graduates walk across the stage, but there's like 3 or 4 that walk across the stage and I went, oh yeah, this is a victory. And to me, that's where I get my satisfaction as a faculty member. But it's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that the other difference between graduate and undergraduate is I feel like the majority of students who are bothering to get a DNP or even an MSN, they're engaged, right?
Mhm.
And unfortunately, in the undergrad, when you meet with them to do an action plan on why they are failing, and their response is, well, I just haven't been studying. It's hard to help.
Mhm.
It's just difficult. You can't create the engagement or the motivation, or at least I don't know how to yet. Y'all feel free to tell me how. I'd sure like it.
We have helped students develop their study schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So sit down with them and have them identify, all the things that they do in a day. And, that helps them to see where they have open times, where they could be studying.
Right. And to study smarter. We all have a learning style. Are they maximizing their learning style in terms of
Mhm.
studying? You know, those are all, I mean, I even have to do that with doctoral students. Probably the biggest issue I have with doctoral students, and it's not my issue, but they just don't have time, right? And just like undergraduate students, I mean, they don't have time many times. Many of them are working, you know, 32 or 40 hours a week. They have a family, and there's still only 24 hours in the day. So sometimes my best advice for a student is let's back down and let's go part-time and let's create better work-life balance
Mhm.
and let's talk about your responsibilities and are there things you can shift. And one would assume that someone who's in a graduate program maybe has a few more resources than someone in an undergraduate program, but that is not a true assumption many times. And so you know, telling someone, well, you're going to have to cut back on work is like telling them, well, just don't eat on Tuesdays. So really have to, there is a lot of disparity in all of our students. And I think that's the real struggle sometimes is I can't fix this for them. And I don't see a way for them to fix it either. And that's when it's really sad.
Yeah.
All right. Excuse me. So where else did we read or did we go to? Okay, has anybody ever read either of the or any of the books that they that we discussed there? Like the culturally responsive teaching of the brain, that's number 11 on the list. Pedagogy of the oppressed, that's number 13. Brave Educator, that's number 14.
So just by chance, I am in the process of reading The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And I'm not very far. I've only read the first chapter, which is, I mean, it's not a very big book. It's probably 120 pages, but it really kind of reinforces some of the behaviors. I feel like we sometimes feel like maybe that student isn't engaged with us. I mean, I felt this way about students where it's like, I don't think they're engaged. Maybe this isn't, you know, the right plan for them. And it just has to do with their previous experience with teachers and with people of authority. And it's kind of made me reframe how I'm thinking about addressing concerns. I've also recently, I'm just about finished with the psychological first aid course through Coursera that talks about trauma and perspective. So, I mean, I don't see that as much with my doctoral students, but I see it a lot with, I teach a healthcare ethics for another school, and I see it a lot with those students. And so it's really making me stop and say, okay, this is what I'm thinking, but is this true? Do I know this is true? And then working to seek to find out, is it true? And you know, I'm been in this a long time, so it's really kind of taxing me at times to say, well, you could be wrong here, Alice. But I've found that I just get farther, and students appreciate my conversation so much more.
I love that. Hannah, you mentioned the psychological first aid course too. What has been your experience with that?
Well, I've taken it. It's really popular in occupational therapy just because, you know, we're treating a lot of psychosocial patients, but the course itself is really good. We've actually tried to encourage our leadership team to bring it to campus for everybody. Kind of still in the works for that, but I could share a link to it in the chat if anybody else was interested. I just think it's a great course, and like Dr. Kinshaw said, brings kind of a different perspective to this. The only other thought I had, during this conversation, I appreciate everybody's willingness to participate. I've been also walking on the treadmill, but I thought maybe it might be an interesting concept to consider expanding those accommodations that students are seeking and talking about and consulting with our student support team with, like expand those to other areas of the class outside of testing. I wonder, if conversations have been had regarding the expansion of those accommodations to include time and a half on assignments or time and a half on practical. No problem. Thank you. Just different things through the accommodations office that I don't know if we've explored, kind of expanding that beyond testing. But thanks for opening it up, Spencer.
So expand on that a little bit. I'm interested. If it's time and a half on assignments, though, do you move your due date for them, or do you just encourage them to study in a different way and build a better study plan? What other tools or resources should we be providing to help with those?
I think, again, it's just kind of a conversation. Like the students could
Okay.
have a conversation with you, have the ability to share their accommodations that they've sought
Okay.
through student support services and ask, what would that look like on this assignment or on this practical? We do it for tests, but we don't do it for practical assessments, which, I don't know. I also know that, Dr. Kimmerling and our team in occupational therapy has helped some of the other programs understand accommodations, both on fieldwork and in the classroom, a little bit better. And I think there's still lots of room to grow with that, just as far as, to what is reasonable and how do you continue to set expectations while also accommodating students' diverse needs, including those DEI concepts.
I would agree with that, Hannah. I have had accommodations where the student got an extra 3 days to complete any written assignment. And part of their accommodations was they were supposed to set a one-on-one meeting up with me as the faculty to give an kind of an update / outline of how they were going to address this assignment. And for some students, they are Johnny on the spot, and usually they would set up that meeting way in advance of the original due date, and they'd meet the due date. And then there were other students, and it was their responsibility to contact me, not my responsibility to contact them. Other students wouldn't follow through with that. And, then when they did submit the assignment, it wasn't as complete as it could be. So it's a lot of work for a faculty member, but those same individuals went on to graduate and become licensed nurses. And so I think it was especially appropriate or it's been my experience, I'm not gonna say especially appropriate, that it was many times students with a learning disability and or where English was a second language.
That's something else to send
Yeah.
over our way as well. I've worked with a number of students on using ChatGPT to do translations, but also a number of other tech tools that are on their iPads, if they have the iPads or their own devices. How do I use this to better provide the information in maybe a language I need, or have it read to me, or check my writing? Lots of ways that they can use tools in the resources that they already have that many students aren't aware of. So certainly feel free to send them our way too. That's why I was interested, Hannah. It's like, what more can we do that we really need to be looking at?
Yeah, I know that our number of students with accommodations is rising. And I think maybe it just comes down to knowing which of those students has accommodations for testing and then, setting up a one-on-one meeting with them to say, how do you feel like this is impacting all the other components of this coursework? Because I think we're just maybe missing it if we're only accommodating them for an exam and not, understanding how those same accommodations that they've discussed and they've, had a diagnosis for are not threading into the classroom. So, it might just come down to, like you said, Allison, it takes a little bit more work, but maybe just having a one-on-one conversation with all of those students have accommodations on exams to say, how does this impact your assignments? How does this impact your practicals? And then here are my expectations as your faculty. If and when these things do impact the grade that you've received, the time that I've asked you to complete this assignment in, et cetera, and so on, here's what I would expect you to do for me, that professional email, 24 hours in advance, whatever that looks like for your, own classroom, kind of setting those expectations, but doing it in a one-on-one way so that you're kind of getting ahead of it rather than waiting until these students are getting, 55 on an assignment. And you're like, what happened? And, oh, I have accommodations because I have, it usually takes me more time to get things done, et cetera, and so on. Maybe we could have got out ahead of that. But I really think it's the same as students who are asking for accommodations in other areas, and we're doing a really great job supporting them for exams, and then kind of it maybe isn't translating to the rest of the classroom. But yeah, it does take some more time. It's more of a one-on-one process. In the OT program, we advise all of our students, like we are our students' advisor as well as faculty member. And I think maybe that's where I'm having more of that one-on-one time with them, is sitting down and saying, as your advisor, what can I do to support you? And then kind of more of those accommodations and how do I provide you equitable, teaching in the classroom kind of come up naturally. Not that I would necessarily suggest that, because advising your own students is quite challenging. It takes up a lot of extra time. So that's maybe not, don't take on the entire role of advising. But if you can have one-on-one conversations.
Great ideas, Hannah.
Yeah, Hannah, at Peru State, we advised all of our students individually as well. We were the advisors, and you're absolutely right. It is a lot of extra work because you're having to have not only you gotta figure out their schedule and all those kinds of things on top of everything else. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe without fully taking on any advising work, just identify those students who have accommodations. Maybe ask them to have a further conversation, disclose more of that with you, just in a one-to-one scenario.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And then being able to build that relationship with them, or that rapport with them, even better, to show that you're truly taking an interest in them and how you can help. That's an excellent idea.
And like Alice said, those are the students you kind of get most excited to see finish their field work and walk across the stage and et cetera and so on, because they've really had their own bell curve in school from the time that they started to the time that they finished, kind of that personal growth. I'm a shameless multitasker, guys, so I apologize for any background noise. I'm going to stop doing that, maybe. But I appreciate everybody's thoughts, and it's been really great to hear from those of you who are already doing some of this in your classroom. The occupational therapy program is probably going to get new standards in end of 2024. So we're just kind of exploring, whether we really truly want to go to competency-based education. Threading through those DEI models, there's a lot more standards on DEI in the upcoming revisions. So it's just kind of on our minds and on the horizon. I mean, we had a great site visit recently, with accreditation, but all of those standards are getting changed in 2024. So not something to look forward to in our program, but it is something that, we're just trying to be really thoughtful about. Do we move to ungraded, pass fail, less assignments, more practical, what does that look like? I think we have room to explore that. So if anybody has any great suggestions, we'd love to hear them, anytime over the course of the next year.
Well, Hannah, there are schools that do it, right? I get EDD students where their transcript was just satisfactory or unsatisfactory for a master's degree. So it is an interesting sort of of way of thinking, and in looking at those schools, they keep doing the assignment until they get a satisfactory, and so they really do assure that they've met the competency that way. But it'd be a big change.
It'd be a big undertaking. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But it's something to say for whether it's graded or ungraded. I think remediation is the way to go. I believe in that. It's my personal opinion. It doesn't do our students any good to, give them that 55 or whatever, and then kind of say, next one will be better. I think remediation is the way to go. It's just sort of whether that's graded, undergraded, whether there's a late or a penalty for having to take it that second time. But I really appreciated some of the stuff you already said, Alice, regarding how you do that in the doctoral program. I think that we could definitely pull some of that down and continue, thinking on what that looks like in our revision of all of our standards upcoming. So I appreciate that.
All right, well, we're rolling down to the last few minutes here. Spencer and I have put a few resources up there. Please don't forget to do the Qualtrics survey for your Dove points. We keep those on track for HLC as well. So that's how we do our HLC reporting. And you'll be getting prizes, or at least raffle tickets to prizes at the next development day. Spencer put a piece up on Wes Moore. Do you want to make a comment there, Spencer?
I do, yeah. So we're talking about DEI a lot here today, and this book is called The Other Wes Moore. It's a story about two gentlemen who have the exact same name, but they live in the same town, the same city, but they're separated by a handful of blocks, like in town, and just how the placement of where they grew up, even though they're in the same town, really set their life on an interesting trajectory. So very fascinating, quick read. Certainly opened my eyes. So just thought I would share that out with you. It's not necessarily education based, but it's certainly connected to everything we were talking about today.
And then the last piece I put up there was just a lunch and learn that will be coming out for an invite shortly, but you're getting kind of a heads up. We got the new DEI syllabus checklist that Allison will be presenting a lunch and learn on November 8th from 11 to 12. All right, thanks for the great conversation, folks. I love it, and keep up the great work. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.